So President Trump is going to give a speech on tax reform on Wednesday. And the reason I'm talking about it today is because I want you to be prepared for the types of words and language that Trump's going to use to try to make you think that this tax reform plan is in your best interest, when in reality, it's really just in the best interests of the rich and multinational corporations. So first, let me give you a bit of a primer from Politico so you understand what Trump will be talking about. President Donald Trump will launch a major push for a sweeping tax overhaul with a speech Wednesday in Missouri, aimed at convincing his base and the rest of the nation that he has a fresh vision for unrigging the American economy, and isn't just repackaging the trickle-down economics of past Republican presidents. Essentially, he'll be trying to argue that slashing taxes for corporations is in line with the populist Make America Great Again message that drove his surprise election victory last year. The tax speech is being drafted by senior White House aide Stephen Miller, a leader of the nationalist wing of the administration. In Trumpian style, he'll try out new phrases for selling the policy, like Jumpstart America and Win Again. Okay, so a couple points here. First of all, the guy writing the speech, Stephen Miller, is a rich kid from Southern California, so he has no experience in income inequality. And secondly, look at how they're trying to sell it, with phrases like Jumpstart America and Win Again. So the reason why politicians have to use phrases like this is only when the policies can't sell themselves. So if Trump came out there and said, I'm going to give tax cuts to the rich and to large multinational corporations, the majority of the American people would not buy that, because the majority of the American people are actually against those things. That's why he has to use a phrase like win again to mask what the reality of the actual policy is. Now, in this next point, I'm going to discuss why there may actually be some Democrats who are on board with this. So USA Today dived into this tax reform plan. The New York Times editorial board recently argued that a rare bipartisan consensus existed on closing loopholes in order to lower the top corporate rate of 35% and would help American businesses compete globally. So the New York Times editorial board argued in favor of this tax reform. The New York Times, what Trump calls fake news. Now, why would the New York Times be on board with this Trump GOP tax reform? Maybe it's because it also benefits them. First of all, the effective tax rate corporations pay, meaning the actual rate after credits and deductions are taken into account, is roughly 20%, not 35%. This is in line with other highly industrialized democracies in the Group of Seven, and hardly holding American companies back. Today, US corporations are massively profitable and already sitting on close to $2 trillion of cash. But instead of investing in capital improvements or worker pay that could benefit the broader economy, executives raise their own salaries and juice the price of their stock options. Companies are using their massive profits to buy back their own stock, which puffs up its paper value without creating real business value. Since the 1980s, after laws and norms limiting this changed, corporate payments to shareholders have more than doubled relative to investments, and today are in fact greater than corporate investments, hardly productive. So this has really been happening since the 1980s, which explains graphs like this. So when you look at wage increases since 1979, the top 1% as of 2013 grew by 138%, and compare that with the bottom 90%, which only grew by 15%. And this next graph is likely to make you mad at your CEO, who now earns 296 times what a typical worker earns. And I'll put a link below the video to all that data, but the reality is that most people are already aware of this. So this year, Americans were polled on how they feel about taxes. 63% of people believe that upper income people pay too little in taxes. And the same goes for corporations. 67% of people feel that corporations pay too little in taxes. But maybe you think all the data isn't in yet. So there's actually a recent example of how cutting taxes on the rich and large corporations destroyed an economy. Kansas, under Republican Governor Sam Brownback, massively slashed tax rates on corporations and high individual incomes. Instead of unleashing growth, this led Kansas to grow more slowly than surrounding states, and also caused a state budget deficit so severe that the rating agency S&P described it as structurally imbalanced. Last year, as the scope of the tax failure became clear, Brownback earned the dubious distinction of least popular governor in the country, with a 65% disapproval rating. So no matter how or where it's tried, this sort of tax reform has not worked. So don't be fooled by phrases like Jumpstart America or Win Again. That doesn't mean anything. All it's doing is masking the fact that Trump and the GOP's tax reform is actually just tax cuts for the rich and large multinational corporations.